everyone, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, come back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Adrienne Brown-Norman. Welcome. So just give a little 30-second intro about who you are, your career, whatever. Yes.
Oh, well, I'm Adrienne. I worked for Disney Publishing. I've been with Disney Publishing for 28 years as an illustrator, manager, and but I've been an artist all my life. I've done everything from paintings and portraits to theme park work and designing theme parks in Japan, and so I'm a little bit of everything. So, and I've been
Renaissance woman.
Well, pretty much, and for over 40 years.
Nice.
Easily.
So first question, where are you from and how was it growing up?
Well, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and interesting place to grow up. It was not, there is a Black community. People always say, oh, there are Black people in Omaha. Yes, yes, there are. There's quite a few. Interesting way of growing up. As an artist, I had a very creative family. So thankfully, my family was very encouraging for me as an artist. But outside of my family, not so much. In Omaha in the 1970s, I was not encouraged to be an artist, even though I was really, really good and I had excellent teachers. So I have a little story about that. But yeah, it was interesting as an artist growing up.
Is that the story about how you wanted to go to the Art Institute in Chicago?
Yes. How did you hear that story?
I didn't. Well, I've met you and Floyd when
when
you all came to New Orleans for Essence Festival for his film.
Oh,
I met you all then.
Okay.
But I got it. Somebody said it on Twitter, so I haven't heard the story. So you can tell it.
I'll tell you the story. I was taking 2 art classes a day, and I had an excellent teacher, a woman named Ms. Lure, and she suggested that I try to get a scholarship to go to Chicago Art Institute. And so she helped me prepare my portfolio to talk to my counselor, and my counselor was less than happy. Matter of fact, he didn't even look at my portfolio, and he told me that I was Black and female, and that I would never make it as an artist, and he was going to do me a favor and not sign the papers and not recommend me, and that I should take a course in secretarial and become a whatever. And so I told him to kiss my Black ass. 17, I imagine, and I got up and I walked out, and I wanted to quit school, and my mom said, "Well, don't do that," but I did eventually. I just didn't care anymore, and I never went to art school. My art school is me drawing every day and going to museums and galleries and getting books at the library, and I basically taught myself, although my art teacher was an excellent teacher. So a lot of my good basics I did get in school, in my high school and junior high school. So so I did have good basics, and then I took that and expanded on it. But the thing was that I knew I was good, and I was just so upset that he didn't even want to look at my work. He was so dismissive of me. It really pissed me off.
So what were some of your best childhood memories?
My family. My family is very interesting. My father was a musician. My mom was a musician, and there's five siblings. My brother passed away this summer, but we were all either musicians or artists or both. And so my family was extremely creative, but very poor. So a lot of times we drew and listened to music to forget about being hungry. It was a lot of hard time. My mom was very ill. So my happiest times would be the time spent with my brothers and my sister, just being creative. We were very, very close-knit, and we still are. So.
Do you have any traditions from childhood that you remember that y'all had, or?
Not really. My father was very different, and he raised us in an unusual way. I think we were like an experiment for him. No, I think so. I think he tried to keep us. He kept us from a lot of other kids for a bit. So that's why the 5 of us were very, together. and we were just different. And he always taught us to look at things a certain way. He was a very angry black man, and so
Mm-hmm.
he was very like an activist and all that. But he also taught us to not be afraid
Mm-hmm.
of anyone, white people especially. And he said, the whole world is yours. You can do whatever you want in this world. There'll be people who won't let you. That doesn't really count. You do what you have to do, what you want to do, and don't ever be afraid of white people. That was something he really made us understand. So to this day, I've never been afraid of white people, which is probably why I have so many white friends, because I don't look at them. I'm not like, oh, what do you want? What are you after? I'm just like, well, if you're cool with me, I'm cool with you. And I
Mm-hmm.
got that from my dad. And we just raised in a very creative culture, and books, music, art. We had I will say one thing. My father had a book list, and
Mm-hmm.
we had to read certain books by a certain age, and these are books in our house. This is outside of
Yeah.
school, and we had to read certain books by the time we were certain ages. And then my mother was a reader. She had
Mm-hmm.
lost her hearing, so reading kind of helped her with her equilibrium. And as
Mm-hmm.
a family, we would go to the library every week. Every Wednesday, we would go as a family to the library, and my mom and dad would be in the adult section. We would be in the kids section, and every now and then I'd wander out to the adult section because the kids' books were boring, and I was tired of those, and I wanted something a little more interesting. So it was a great way to grow up in that regard.
Yeah, I have moments in my 20s where I was like looking back at my childhood, like, why was I reading Native Son in middle school? And it's because my father gave it to me. And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah. I think that's what. Well, my dad, his thing was we had to read the Iliad and the Odyssey.
mm-hmm,
We had to read Julius Caesar, and my dad's favorite book was Great Expectations.
mm-hmm,
And he loved Dickens, and so for some reason that was on his list. But the main thing was that he wanted us to read everything. He
mm-hmm,
said, if you have a question, if you want to know about something, read about it, find out, go and look it up. And we were never discouraged from doing anything in that regard. So and I remember my grandmother during the 60s, she would send articles about things happening to black people, and if there was still lynchings, we knew about that. And my parents, my friends' parents were like, you guys are too young to know those things. And my dad said, no, you need to know this. Now, in some ways, I wish he hadn't told me when I was 6 years old that some guy just got lynched in Mississippi. I mean, as a little kid, that terrified me. But my father felt that we needed to know so we could navigate in
yeah,
the world, you know.
right.
So it was a very unusual upbringing, and it made my sisters and brothers very unusual. We were we were, we were really kind of nerdy and weird and odd, and we
Mhm,
still are. As old people in our 60s, we're still very different. And
mhm.
yeah, it's it's kind of weird, and now I like it. But when I was a teenager, I wanted to fit in a little more,
Yeah,
and that didn't help. So I became a Black Panther. That helped a little bit. So that.
yeah. I will be asking you about that. So, what was your personal journey in art from like how early did you start drawing? Like, what kind of through childhood? What was your personal art
Well,
journey?
I can't remember not drawing, so that's the answer to that. I knew from the time I was 3, 4 years old that I felt I felt good doing what I was doing. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember one of my first memories when I was in kindergarten was I didn't talk much. You have to go back. My mother lost her hearing when I was 2. So
Okay.
I was just starting to talk, and I think I felt that since she couldn't hear me, why should I talk? So I developed a stutter. And I was
Mm-hmm.
so embarrassed by that stutter that I wouldn't talk at all.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got to kindergarten, they thought, something might be, I might be on the spectrum or something like that. So one day I was painting in the class, and as most kids were painting stick figures, I was drawing fully formed figures with
Mm-hmm.
flesh, because that's how we look. We're not sticks. We have flesh. So anyway, I was doing that, and I went to an all white school. My family was the only Black family in this school in South Omaha. And
Mm-hmm.
they went and got the principal and some other white people, and they came to the classroom, and they looked at me, And they were like, oh, she must be autistic. She must be like some idiot savant or something like that. So, because I was painting, but I didn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought there was something not quite right. So they tested me a little bit here and there and found out that no, nothing was, whatever. I just didn't talk and I was an artist.
Right.
I don't know, what do you want from me? Anyway. But I kept, I just loved to draw. I just felt, it just felt natural. And I saw things that other kids didn't see. When I looked at trees, when I looked at the lighting and color, it all just spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was never a time that I didn't want to do what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Never a time. So it was embedded in me. And in my family, it was encouraged. So we didn't have paper a lot. So my dad would go get newspapers and we would color on newspapers and old cardboard boxes and we'd make things and stuff. So I was encouraged. And my brothers and sisters were also artists as well. So we're all drawing together.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my mom send me my kindergarten progress report because I also didn't talk. I don't know why, but
artists don't talk. They don't talk until much, much later in life. So anyway.
But I also did, like, later in life, I did Toastmasters, and in one meeting I won Best Speaker, so I wanted to juxtapose the she doesn't talk to, like, Best Speaker.
There you go. Well, see, that's what I took drama class.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really want to be an actress, but my stuttering was always something that I was very uncomfortable about. And I still stutter when I get upset or if I get nervous. Mm-hmm. But that helped me to learn how to slow down and get control of what my mouth is saying. There's still certain words that I have a hard time saying if I'm talking real fast. And funny thing is, both Floyd and I stutter. And it's unusual for girls to stutter. I found that out. They usually guys stutter. And it was unusual that little girl stutter. So I don't know what that was all about. But it was something that I didn't like. And I found that the drama class helped me to learn how to slow down, although I didn't want to be an actress. That wasn't my goal. I wanted to do set design. That's why I got in.
Oh, nice.
So there you
go. So you mentioned this already. At one point, you were a Black Panther. What is the importance of activism and advocacy in your life?
Well, for us, both my parents were. My father was passionate, and interesting side note to that, my father was very, very light. I mean, he could have passed, and a lot of white people just assumed he was white, and there's a story about that. But he was about the most proud Black man, the angriest Black man I think I've ever met in my life. I mean, I have so many stories about my dad, but he was very proud. He campaigned for Robert Kennedy. He wanted to go to Selma to do the march, but then my mother got sick and he didn't get a chance to go. And so he impressed upon us the importance of being aware of what's going on around you and being responsible for what's going around. You don't just sit back and let other people do whatever. So when Martin Luther King, and Bobby Kennedy, Malcolm X, when they all got assassinated, my sister and my brothers, it just kind of sparked us. And the Panthers were in Omaha, and my sister became a Panther because she was old enough. You had to be 18 to join. So I was a junior Panther. They called me the junior Panther. So what I did was I sold Panther papers, and I would hang out at the headquarters, and I would go to the meetings and stuff. But I couldn't be official until I turned 18. So I was about 16 when I did. But I sold papers at my all-white high school. Because it was interesting because they would just look at me like, what's wrong with you? And we would do these talent shows, and we would do the last poets. We would quote the last poet. We would do their poetry. I remember we did a talent show at my junior high school, and we did I think we did the last poet poem, in die, something like that, or something like that. A good poem. And the Black people, the white people, everybody's like, why are you doing that? And we're like, this is a message. You need to hear this. You need to listen to this. And we had our afro, we had our dashikis and karate, so I could, we were getting ready for the revolution. And it was something that I took seriously. And it wasn't that I hated white people, because that wasn't it. What I didn't like was how people were being treated.
Right.
Eventually, the Panthers, the look of it was, we need to help all oppressed people. anyone that's under the thumb of someone, that was something that was understood. But we
Yeah.
were first. We had to deal with us first, and then we could, expand. And I eventually kind of grew out of that, but the basic tenets of it, I still believe.
Right.
That people who are hurt, people who are abused, oppressed, there's, you can't just stand there and watch that. You have to, do what you can,
Yeah.
And so that I got that from my father and from my mother. And when I moved to Florida, I remember the boss, my boss at my company I worked for was a KKK. And I found that out because I heard him on the phone, And this was funny because I was 21. I was working there at this sign company, and his name was JJ. And one day we were talking, and I said to him, well, I used to be a Black Panther. He stopped and he just kind of looked at me, and he said, well, why would you do that? I said, well, do you really want to know? He said, well, yeah, why would you be that? And I said, we talked. And I told him about, Black people in America and why, And it was funny. He looked at me like I never thought of it that way. Now, I don't know if he stopped being a Klans member. Who knows? I'm sure he kept on wearing his robe, but that moment, maybe something that he had never thought of.
Right.
Maybe something in his head. Who knows? He's probably dead now because he was pretty old then. But my thing was that I wasn't afraid to talk to him. And that I got from my parents.
Yeah.
Because most people would have been like, oh, well, we need to stay away from that guy. Because but something told me, you know what? I need to say to him this. He can digest what I just said.
Right.
And we can talk about it if you like. If you don't want to, that's your problem. But I'm right here. And I was only 21. I literally was 21 years old.
Yeah.
I had just moved to Florida. So I was an idiot. Because he could have easily, done something to hurt me. But, when you're young, you feel, no one can hurt me. I'm on top of the world. So there you go.
Yeah. Sometimes, like in my generation of being in the animation industry, I kind of feel sometimes like I'm different because, like, when I was in New Orleans, living in New Orleans, I would I've been involved in the Urban League movement for the past 10 years. Okay. And so before I moved to LA last year, I was the president of my local chapter. And so it was like I would be at this company called Turbo Squid. And it's like a bunch of like nerdy animation people. And then on Thursday, like the third Thursday of the month, I'll be in my like dress or my slacks. And every third Thursday, are you going to an interview? Like, no, I'm going to my meeting. It's the young professionals. I'm trying to look professional. We get to wear T-shirts after work. I don't want to show up in a T-shirt.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's just like having that dichotomy of like being in an art industry, but also like being in the civil rights vein where you're like trying to help people and educate people and stuff is like really interesting.
Well, I think if you have to do, you find how your life works out. I found that where my life has gone is that when Floyd and I do things, especially when the movie came out, we would find ourselves in different towns and cities with people from all walks of life. And we ended up becoming like kind of like spokespeople, even though we weren't trying to be.
Yeah.
And people were listening to what Floyd obviously had to say. And then I would be on stage with him sometimes. I would do it on purpose because I think people have a misconception about Floyd. And I felt like I need to sit here and help you get the full picture of who Floyd Norman is. Not who you think he is, but who Floyd Norman is.
Yeah.
And so don't think he's something else that he's not. So I thought that was my duty. And we did it all over the country, talking to people. So I think that's become my crusade, I guess. So, I ended up with the platform that I did not ask for. But, when you presented with a challenge, you accept it and you go with it.
So can you tell the story, the white passing story you thought of about your father? Oh,
my goodness. My father was trying to buy a house, and this would have been before the civil rights movement. This would have been about 1961, 62, because I was about 6 or 7 years old, so 63, something like that. Anyway, he had bought a house. Well, he had almost bought a house, but they had not met my mother or us kids. And so my father had gotten all the way through to escrow, and he decided, now I'm going to bring the family out so they can see the house. And my mother was very, very dark. I think my dad went out of his way to get the darkest woman he could possibly get. There she is. That's the woman I'm going to marry, which is the whole colorism story with his mother, who didn't want him to marry a dark-skinned woman. She wanted him to marry someone light to keep the light going. And they say, she was a trip. But anyway, he met my mother, who was an amazing human being, and I can see why he fell in love with her. So he packs us into the car, and we go see the house, and this little white man, I'll never forget, he comes out, and we're in the car, and he looks at the car, and he sees my mom in the front seat, and he sees all of us kids sitting in various positions in the car, no seatbelts then. And he said to my father, something has come up, and your escrow, we can't do the deal. The house has been denied, however way he said it, because I was in the car. And I'll never forget the look on my father's face, because he did this to him in front of his wife and children. And my father had done everything he could, and he was working hard to save the money to buy this house. And he was so angry, humiliated, pissed. I think he cussed the man out. My father was real good about that shit. I mean, he just, he was just like, I think he called him, like the MF, whatever. No, and he gets in the car. And he didn't get the house. And in those days, he didn't have any recourse because the civil rights law had not been passed. And the redlining was real. And the banking stuff was real. And once they found out that whether he was a white man or married to a black woman, whatever they thought it was, that would have kept him from getting the house. They would have made sure he didn't get nothing he could really do. And I'll never forget that. And to this day, I can still see it. And he was so upset. He got in the car and, nothing we could do. And then he never got the house. He never bought a house. And then my mom and my dad, they split. And he went, whatever. But we saw him as years went by. But that hurt him, And so, but when he went to buy the house, he didn't say he wasn't black, but he knew you have to navigate those waters. I have no problem with that because there's no way he would have got it any other way. So there you go.
Can you talk about, I know you had like a little time with the Black Panthers, but can you talk about some like misconceptions of the Black Panthers from lack of information or ignorance?
Well, when I was in the Panthers, they were doing a lot of community stuff. I mean, they were doing the breakfasts, they were doing a lot of outreach, but they were also vocal. They were also saying, we're not going to let you, do whatever. And I think what happened in Omaha, the worst thing was they set the Panthers up to put them in prison. Our two leaders, both, I think one died in prison a couple of years ago. This white cop goes into a house and he gets blown up. They said that the Panthers planted the bomb, but there were people on that street, some old people that we knew and whatever, and they had told the cops, no, we saw some white guys go into that abandoned house a couple of days before to do whatever. And he said, no, and none of that ever came up at trial. No one, they never did any investigation. So we know that it was a plant. We know what they did. Right. And Panthers ended up, they got broken up. And my sister, they would follow us, everywhere we went. I go to school, they'd follow me to school. We'd come home and they shine lights into the cops shine lights into our house. My sister, she had all these rifles and guns they gave her, told her to put them in the attic, and whatever. We were preparing for the revolution. We had gotten this other group, this black group, that was telling us about the Rand McNally maps and how they could close off the freeways so that they would block black people in and you wouldn't be able to get out or get food in. And so that was something that the freeways were built for that reason. The whole system of freeways in America were built to control. And that's kind of true. Some of it wasn't particularly just to keep people in the neighborhood, but that is part of what they did. It is a way to block. If you remember during the Rodney King, they were able to block off that whole area so you couldn't come in or go out. Because I lived in that area and I had to wait a day or so before I could come back home to my apartment. So we knew there were certain things, but the Panthers were getting on the nerves of the local government and they wanted to stop them. And that's all there was to it. And they did. Now, there were still other black groups. I got involved with Black Theater. It's a wonderful group started by the Urey family in Omaha. that
Mm-hmm.
did plays, Douglas Turner Ward and stuff like that, and I loved it because we were learning all these things, and there was all kinds of. I mean, there was so much more than it is today. It seems weird. You think there would be more today, but in the
Yeah.
early '70s, there was so much community stuff, and I took karate. I was learning how to. Oh man, I'm looking back on it. I had it was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my karate class, I loved it until my teacher started feeling on me, which was really annoying because I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to learn karate. And he'd flip
Right.
from the ground and then he kind of went like this. I'm like, dude, really?
Right.
Just felt like, come on, I'm trying to learn how to do self-defense and here you are, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I love men, so it's just him. He's a jerk.
Right.
But I just remember then that time period, that black theater, oh my God, it was such an amazing time to be alive. And
Mm-hmm.
wish that we had it if it was like that way for young people today, because what it did was it got you involved. It got you thinking outside of yourself and thinking about not only your community, but the world.
Yeah.
And that's when I began to start looking beyond. I started looking at the whole world. There people are hurting for horrible reasons everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? And trying to figure out a way, how can we make things better? And here we are, almost worse off than we were in the 1970s in some ways. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's pretty bad. But continue on. I don't want to get depressed now. I'm going to cry now. No, my eyes work. So.
So, can you go through some of the projects that you've worked on in your career? There's I don't know if there's a site for illustration, but all I found was A Kiss Goodnight. I'm like, where's a list?
Well, there actually is no list, and I have a Flickr page which has some of my artwork on it, but I am not how do I put it? I'm an introverted social person,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't really care if no one knows everything that I've done. If you meet me and we talk about it, that's a different thing, and I'll talk about it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that I think about.
Yeah.
Since being with Floyd, people have asked me more of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, well, okay. But I've been with Disney for 28 years, so I've done so many books for Disney. It is not funny. I don't even remember how many books I've done that are available. You can buy them, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But before Disney, I worked on a theme park company for a place called Landmark Entertainment, which built 2 theme parks in Japan. Got to live in Japan for 2 years off and on. That was an amazing experience. And the park, what we built is still standing. I've never seen it because once they opened it, they let us all go. So I never got to see anything that I did, how it looks. So I have no idea. But I've been doing pastels. I discovered pastels when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for an art form that I could afford. And I was very poor. And so I started out doing watercolors and pen and ink because it was cheap.
Yeah.
Then someone gave me some chalks. No, they gave me oil pastels first. And those were okay, but you couldn't blend them right. Then I got my first pastels. I fell in love with the medium. It was like, it answered all my questions because I'm immediate. I don't want to have to wait. With oils, you got to wait for it to dry, and you got to wait. And even acrylics, you got to wait. But acrylic color is not as rich as oils. But with pastels, it was the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. And I just started doing them, and it just felt like I had found my home. And I remember I was doing pastels in Florida, living there with my first husband, and I was in a little art show. And I had my pastels, and I'll never forget, this old white man came up to me and said, "You're doing your pastels wrong." Now, I was about 21, and so when you're 21, you just, like an old person, and go like, well, okay, he must know what he's saying. I don't know. And I didn't want to argue with him, but in my mind, I'm like, well, how the hell do you know whether it's the right way? This is how I want to do it. Who are you to tell me that what I'm doing is wrong? Well, in his mind, Degas and Pissarro and all the Impressionists would do the, very whatever style.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing mine like that. My pastels were very detailed in a way that you don't expect pastels to be, because that's what I wanted to do. I don't know. What do you want from me? Once again, I did that because I couldn't afford paints, but I'm a very detail-oriented painter.
Yeah.
So I just translated what I would have been doing in paint to my pastels. And that's how I started doing them I did portraits for years. I moved to California doing portraits on Venice Beach. Matter of fact, one of my favorite stories, I was doing portraits out there trying to make money. Me and my partner, we came out from Omaha, my friend Brian, and this guy comes up to me and says, "You want to be in a music video?" And I was like, "Well, I just moved here. I've been here like a year." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." You just kind of wonder, like, what kind of music video?
Yeah.
And I know that we're in the porn capital of the world, so I don't know what he wants, But I'm like, sure, what are you talking about? He says, "Well, I have a video coming up. We want you to draw Frank Sinatra." And he went, "Pretend like you're drawing Frank Sinatra on camera in Venice Beach." And I said, "Sure." And he says, "We'll pay you." And I happen to love Frank Sinatra. He's my favorite singer. So I said, "Sure." So he gave me a picture of Frank Sinatra. Look, go home tonight, draw this, but don't finish it. Bring it back here and to the set on Venice, and then you pretend like you're drawing him. Well, I didn't meet Frank. Frank didn't show up, but the director sat in a chair, and I pretended like I was drawing Frank, the back of the gray hair. And it was for a song called "L.A. is My Lady" that Frank Sinatra did in 1984. Quincy Jones produced it.
Nice.
And I'll never forget, he said, "Look, well, thank you for that." He said, "The craft services is over there. Grab yourself some food." Now, understand, my friend, I had just moved here. We were starving. And we went over there and we packed up plates. And we put foil on it, and it was like, oh my God, food. And then Quincy Jones came out the trailer with Patty Austin. And I met Quincy and stuff, and it was like, this is cool, but this is cooler that I got food. We got food for the, whatever. And they paid me $50 to draw them. And I actually put my name and phone number on the back of the picture in case Frank saw it. I don't know if Frank ever saw it or not. Who knows what happened to the picture? I think the director kept the picture because it was pretty good, actually. I wish he had gave it back to me if he didn't want it. But a couple of days later, no, about a month later, he called me and says, "Well, we decided not to use that segment." So I ended up on the cutting room floor, my first Hollywood experience.
Oh, man.
On the cutting room floor, no one will ever see me pretending to draw, Frank Sinatra. They did do, if you ever see the video, it's about LA. It was about the time that the Olympics were going to be here. So they were doing all this stuff showing LA, and he's saying, "LA is my lady," and then you see this big man. Anyway, it was a pretty cool experience. So being on Venice Beach was kind of nice because I was drawing people from all walks of life, and everybody came to Venice Beach back in those days. So it was quite an experience. So that kind of kept me doing my pastels and stuff. But then I had two shows. I had two art shows, and that I brought Floyd to one when I first met him. I got tired of doing pastels. I got tired of doing them in about 2009. And I was doing a commission for someone. I ended up drawing it 4 times because it wasn't working. And I said, I'm done. And I didn't do pastels again until last year. I did some pastels at my friend's house. And I felt pretty good.
Yeah.
I was about to start doing it again. Then I went back to work. I was on furlough. And then Disney put me back. And I was like, well, okay, enough of that. So, but I may go back because my friend's studio, he's a famous artist, and his studio is almost done. And he says, well, if you want to come back and do some more, you can. So I have the space to do pastels. But Floyd would love it if I did pastels.
So what medium do you use for your illustration at work? Oh,
digital. Okay. I am so digital, it's not even funny. And I'll explain that because I got into digital when I was working at a company called The Works, theme park company in Long Beach. And they were already into computers. This would have been 1991. And I saw a friend of mine on the computer, and he was playing around with this program. It was called Photoshop. We literally had just come out, Photoshop. I don't even think it was a 1 yet. It was just Photoshop. And I said, what are you doing? What is that? And he says, oh, this is Photoshop. He says, can you teach me how? I said, oh, yeah. So I sat down. I said, just remember Command-Z, pull the menu down, and see what each menu does. And he said, that's it? I said, yeah. And I did. And at the time, he had a Wacom tablet. And the Wacom tablet back then was like a desk that was this big edge, and the pen was a cord attached to it. So you took the pen up and you drew it like that. But the moment that the pen touched it, and he said, you have to look at the screen and then draw. And I was like, oh. and it just felt natural.
Mm-hmm.
It was never no problem with that. It was like me and the computer were meant to be together. So I've been on the computer for 30 years.
Nice.
Easily. And it's what I do every day, and I love it. I don't have any problem with digital or traditional. It's like, for me, I look at the computer as a tool, as another brother, and I'm really good at it. So there you go. But I was going to tell you there's an addendum to the Quincy Jones thing.
Okay.
When I first met him, and they saw me getting food, and he was so nice, Patty. And then about a year or so ago, I went to the AFCA Awards, African American Film Critics Association, and they were honoring Quincy Jones. And I met him again. And we hung around. We always hung around because we got an award from them a couple of years ago. And Quincy was holding court, and we got a chance to go over there and talk to him, me and Floyd and our friend Jeff. And I told him how I met him on that video. I said, "You don't remember me." I said, "But I met you on Venice Beach when you were doing the video for Frank Sinatra." "Oh, Frank Sinatra. That's my man. He gave me this ring." And he started showing me this ring that Frank gave him. And we had a wonderful conversation about the making of that video and about him and Frank. But it had come full circle, kind of a thing, that here I am and I'm meeting Quincy, and now he's an old guy sitting there and I'm old. And so, but anyway, it's one of those things that when you live your life and little things that happen and the connection. So that was all. I just wanted to finish that story, that I met him again, like however many years later. Geez, 30 years later.
Nice.
And I meet him again. So there you go.
So what do you feel like was the biggest breakthrough in your career, or did you have multiple breakthroughs?
I'd say the biggest breakthrough, two breakthroughs, was getting hired at Landmark Entertainment, because I was going through some really hard times, homeless for a bit. I was sleeping in my ex-boyfriend's father's den, and that was interesting. And so I'm sleeping there, and I don't have a home, and I started going to this computer tech school, but that was to teach me how to do drafting. That had nothing to do with what I eventually ended up doing. And over by the Coliseum, and I was learning how to do drafting and stuff like that. And the only female in the class, the only woman in the class. And my teacher knew this man from Landmark Entertainment, and he had called him and said, "Look, I'm looking for some draftsmen that possibly might know how to draw." And my teacher said, "Wait a minute, I got the perfect person for you." And I hadn't even finished the course. I'd been there for like 5 months. And he says, "You need to go see this guy, Wes Cook, and talk to him." And I go to see Wes, and he's the most wonderful man. He passed away some years ago. And he said, "You don't have anything in your portfolio. You don't have any drafting. You don't have anything architectural." I says, "Well, no, I've been an artist all my life, and I'm now learning this, but I don't have it. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give you a drawing that I did for this thing I designed, and I want you to take it." So he gives it to me, and I was hungry. I think I'd had a tuna fish sandwich that day. That was it. And I went home and I copied it. I drew it just the way he did it, and I took it back to him. So, "Oh, I didn't mean the next day." "No, you don't understand. I need whatever." So anyway, I came back, and he had the drawing, and he says, "One moment." And he called in people, "Come here." And I'm trying to figure out what is going on here, because I'm nervous. So he brings in a friend who eventually became a friend, Barbara, and someone else, and they were like, "Oh my." And they're all kind of nodding and looking at me, and then they left. I don't know what's going on. And he hired me. And he said, you have some drafting skills. I can see you because you're going to that class. I think you'll learn, but your artwork, you know how to draw. And the problem I have is I have architects who don't understand art. They're architects, but they can't draw. And we were doing whimsical. This theme park was supposed to feel like Snow White in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
And the architects didn't know how to do thatch. They didn't know how to do cute. They didn't know how to draw that way. And I did. So I got the job. The funny part was when they talked to me about my salary. I'll never forget, because they said, "Well, look, you don't have a lot of experience and stuff, so we're not going to be able to start you at what we would normally start someone." And I'm like, "Okay, And he says, "So unfortunately, we won't be able to start you at $15 an hour." Now understand, I'm making $7 an hour at all my jobs. I'm making minimum wage. And I'm just sitting there going like, he said, is that okay? And I'll never forget, I left here almost like the movie Happiness, and when Will
Yeah.
Smith walks out and he just goes like this. That was me.
Yeah.
That was a breakthrough because it kickstarted my career and sent me to Japan, which
Mm-hmm.
gave me a whole nother experience. But then it got me into the job at the Works because of my theme park. By this time, I had experience, and I went to theme park design at the Works, and then I
Mm-hmm.
saw the computer, which was my second breakthrough because the computer brought me to Disney,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I met Floyd. And then my life just went down a whole path that, if someone had told me that was the path, I never would have believed it. So.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I never really had any goals. People always say, well, what were your goals in life? I only had a few goals. I had two goals. And I said I wanted to be an artist and make enough money so I could eat, because eating was a big deal with me from being
Mm-hmm.
working for. And then I wanted to find someone to love me and love them in return. That's all I
Yeah.
ever wanted. I never wanted money, money like, all that. I never wanted that. I just wanted to be an artist and make money doing it, so I don't have to do something else and fall in love and be loved in return. That's all I ever wanted. That is
Nice.
literally all I ever wanted in life. And so,
Mm-hmm.
people say, oh, well, you should have had more goals. No, no, no. I think the goals I had were pretty good. And I think
Yeah.
I've achieved them, and I don't feel like I'm lacking. And I think the one thing I do talk about when I do my talks with Floyd is about, going to school. And nowadays, so many kids, oh, I got to go to art school. And if you want to go to art school, by all means, go to art school.
Mm-hmm.
And you should if you can. But I never did.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, when I get freelancers or someone who wants to work for me at Disney, and then they'll be like, oh, well, I didn't go to, I have this. Man, I don't care about your school. Let me see your,
Right.
if you can't paint or draw like I need, I'm not going to hire you. I don't care what school you went to. And,
Mm-hmm.
and if you didn't go to school, I'm still saying, if you can do what I need you to do, that's really all I care about.
Yeah.
I don't care about anything else. So I do that because I was kind of told, well, you didn't go to art school, and doors were shut because of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I vowed that I would never shut a door on anybody's face.
Mm-hmm.
It had the ability. So that's my lesson that I learned through all that. So
Nice. So I got the opportunity to live in, South Korea for 2 years, and it kind of opened up my mind. So what did you learn from being able to go to Japan?
I love Japan. The only thing I didn't like about Japan was the rain. The rain was, I'm a sun person. I don't like rain. And
Mm-hmm.
so the rain was depressing. And
Yeah.
after a while, you start like, okay, enough. Will there ever be a blue sky ever? I think I remember seeing blue sky maybe once or twice when I was
Mm-hmm.
there, because I was there in the winter and the spring, and then I would end up coming back home and then going back over there. But I found that I was told in my orientation that there would be racism, and they were
Mm-hmm.
preparing me. Says, "Well, you're the first Black person that we're sending over there, from Landmark, and so we want you to be prepared for racism." I had to go to orientation where they taught me about Japanese, how they were going to treat me. And so I'm going over like, well, shit, this is not going to be fun. And I get there, and it was the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't experience any of that. Matter of fact, I felt like I was treated better than my white counterpart. I think they're the ones that got racism, because both people were remembering Pearl Harbor, and they were like, yeah, I know who you are. And so they actually had things with gaijin where they didn't want the gaijin,
Mm-hmm.
put them in the back of the restaurant, or they would, if you came to eat with a white person, they would give you your food, then they would give you your ticket, your check real quick, like get out of this restaurant, But if it was just me,
Mm-hmm.
there all day, and no one would bother
Mm-hmm.
me. They would, if I left my money on the counter, they would follow me. Oh, your money, you could get your money. It was absolutely mind-boggling. I
Yeah.
did not think it was going to be that way. The only thing was the kids and the skin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be on the train, and these little Asian kids would come up, and they would rub my skin to see.
Yeah, to see if it come off.
Now initially it was cute. I was like, okay, that's cute. I get it. I understand what's going on. But then after I would be there 3 months at a time, and I come home. After a couple, I was like, enough. I look at them like, And then they would run back to their parents and it would be like, don't really. I'm not like whatever, but I understood.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to Beppu, because the second park I worked on was on the island of Kyushu. So really hadn't seen black people. In Tokyo, you'll see some black folks. But when I moved to Beppu, oh my goodness, I was like the town curiosity. I mean, I think people would come out, oh my God, there's that black woman again. And they would come out, look at me. But you know what? It was an experience that I am so happy that I had. And I don't have anything really negative, except that there weren't any men. A couple of Asian guys, maybe, and I'm 5'10". So, and I had to wear heels because you're in the office, you had to dress professionally, so to speak. So when I wear heels, I'm 6 feet, 6'1", depending on the heels. So I'd be in the elevator and they'd be like, 2 meters. No, I am not 2 meters. Yes, really, stop it, Or if I go into a store to shop, too big, because the clothing was like size.
Oh yeah, in Korea, they'd be like, "Anio."
Yeah, it's not happening. There's nothing in here that could possibly fit you. So I ended up buying a lot of jewelry and watches and scarves. But I think I'll never forget. I was in the store in Beppu and they were showing a Lakers game for some reason. And I remember I hadn't seen a black man in 3 months easily. And so I'll never forget that I just sat down and watched the game. I'm not a sports person, but I just sat there and I said, man, look at that. His brothers running up and down the court. They just looked so good. It was just like, oh my God. And here he goes again. There he goes. I don't even know who was playing, who was on the team. This would have been 1990, 89, 90. So I don't even know who was on the Lakers. I'm not a sports. They looked so good. I was ready to come home. But other than that, I mean, man, I had a ball, and I loved Japan. I have nothing negative to say about Japan, and it wasn't at all like they said it would be. So
yeah,
it was a very pleasant surprise, So
yeah, my second year in South Korea, I got the opportunity to work at an animation company, which I didn't do on purpose. But I was planning to stay there 2 years, but my first year I had taught English, and I just was over it. Like as an introvert, being stared at, I'm just like, I don't want the attention.
Yeah.
And, people would be like, oh, act like you're on a runway. I'm like, that's for people who like attention, though. Like, I can't act like I'm on a runway.
That's not me, yeah.
So I'm like tall, black, big afro at the time. So there's multiple reasons to stare at me. And I'm like, I'm over it. I know I was originally planning on working at this company for like 2 years, but I'm like, at a year, I'm done. I'm going back home.
Well, I didn't have that problem. Thank God I wasn't teaching English. But a lot of people I knew did teach English in Japan. They would come over and teach English, and I have some friends that met that way and stuff. But working at the theme park and working for Sanrio, because it was Sanrio through Landmark, I met a lot of really great people, and I absolutely loved my job. And I even got to meet Suji-san, who's like the Walt Disney of Japan, the man who started Sanrio, and we had come in and we were drawing things correctly, and now they were building it correctly. And he came into the office, my friend and Richard, we were drawing, and they said, oh, Suji-san. And I'll never forget, he came in, and we didn't know who he was because I don't know the culture much. And I wish someone had told us.
Yeah.
But he comes in and he does the 45-degree bow. And the Japanese were like, oh my God, because they know who he is, And me and Richard are like, oh. So we're bowing and stuff, and he said, "Thank you for saving, for helping us to, because they were building it badly. They were building it the way that it was drawn.
Oh yeah.
And so if you don't know how, if you don't draw thatched roofs right or cute right, it gets built badly. And so why we got hired and why we got sent to Japan, and I loved it, but I never got to see the park finish. So there you go. So that's one project. And my second, you asked me about projects, and the other projects that I'm most proud of that I worked on was at Disney, and it was on the ferries project. And we got on ferries, and we were on ferries for like 7 years. And the woman that imagined the whole look of it, its name, Judith Holmes Clark, and we kind of paired up. We became a team, and she and I are as different as you can possibly get. But she would draw it, and I would say, well, Judy, what'd you have in mind? So, well, so-and-so. And then I would paint it in the computer. And we did all these books, and then the studio decided to make it into the little movies. And I remember that the movies were getting made badly; they weren't looking right. And John Lasseter said, "You guys need to read this Pixie Hollow book." It was the book that we did that shows the whole fairy world. He gave copies to everyone on that team, and they redesigned it and actually went back and looked at all of our chapter book stories, and they started to change it and make it feel more like the world that it should be. And I felt so proud of that. And because of that, John Lasseter had Judy and I do the end credits for the first Tinkerbell movie.
Nice.
So you watch the end credits and you'll see there's like a watercolor thing. And that's me and Judy. And I just so loved painting fairies because in the beginning, there was nothing to art direct to. It was just us because there was no movie. Unlike most things at Disney come from something that you have to match, a movie or standard characters. But in the beginning, fairies was all publishing and it was stories. And we just got to do whatever was in our mind. We got to imagine fantastical worlds, and Judy would draw things, and oh, this is early morning and Tinkerbell's sitting on an oak leaf and she's got a so-and-so, and then I would just paint it in the computer. I was using Painter and Photoshop. And when you see those paintings, people always think that I painted them traditionally and then I scanned it in. They were all painted in the computer, every last one. And that is a project to this day. I miss fairies and I wish I could work on them again. But I know that they think that kids don't want to see that. So now I'm in princess world. So my whole world is princess. But I love painting Tiana. Tiana is my favorite. I don't like let anyone else paint the Tiana characters but me because I just feel a connection to her. And I don't want anyone to mess her up. You know?
Right.
So what we did was, and actually Disney has been very cognizant of the skin tone thing. So when I went on furlough at the beginning of the pandemic, Disney furloughed, I'd say half the employees. And then I came back and the first thing I did was skin tones because Disney had said, we need to go back and fix stuff. And the first thing I fixed was Jungle Book because Mowgli was like a little white boy. I saw there were books under Mowgli where he was like, you know, he had like light brown hair and his skin was pink. I'm like, what? You got the movie. Who is painting it like this? You know, so anyway. So then we finally got around to the princesses and fixing Pocahontas and fixing Mulan and Tiana. And so now they are standard color and this is standard and no one can go in and change that. I mean, who knows if I'm gone, who knows what will happen. But for now, we have the colors as they should be. You know, for the Arab, for a Native American, whatever, for Moana, this is their skin color. Don't make them lighter to sell books at Walmart, which is what was happening. You know, we want to sell the books. We got to make them a little bit whatever. No, not anymore. Either you buy the book or you don't buy the book.
Right.
You know? So I have to give them credit for that, but it was a lot of work. Because I was seeing books that were done back in the 70s that had been digitized, and they're saying, you got to fix this. But they're not in layers because they were painted traditionally and then scanned in. So fix your skin color. So yeah, I can do it. It's just Photoshop. I can do anything in Photoshop. It worked out. So that's how I met Floyd. So I don't know if you're going to ask me that, but I was tell you that one. So.
Yeah, feel free. Go ahead.
Well, the way I met Floyd was I had lost my job at the Works, but I had gotten into computer, and my friend at Disney said, you know, they may have use for that, you know. And so I came in to meet with this one man who was so dismissive of me and my work that he didn't even let me sit down. I will not say his name, but he was very dismissive. But my friend said, look, there's another guy that you need to meet. And through this other guy, I met a man named Gary Albright. This was in December of 92. And Gary said, you know what, we're going to be doing our first digital book in April, and I'll give you a call. I'm like, yeah, right. Because in December, I was starving. Again, I'm down to eating, you know, a bowl of rice and some, I love seaweed from living in Japan. So a bowl of rice, some seaweed and whatever. So I had gotten this. So April came and he called me, came in and he hired me as a freelancer. And he said, we're going to do our first digital book and we don't know what we're doing. And he said, can you help us out? And so I'll never forget. And I met Floyd. I said, well, show me what you got. You know, they were painting in bitmap. Do you know what bitmap is? Yes, you know what bitmap is. So they were drawing in bitmap. So everything is pixelated. And they said, why is it like this? We can't make the pixels go away. And so they're showing me. And I'm sitting there like, and these are like they're all men. It's Floyd and a couple other guys that ended up being friends. I said, you idiots. And I think I did call them idiots. I can't remember now. But I said, look, let me show you. So I go onto their computer, which was a Quadra 900 at the time, Mac Quadra 900. And I said, look, you turn it to millions of colors and you turn it to grayscale, or whatever. And then when they said, oh my God, it's gone, the pixels are gone. So they started calling me the Photoshop lady. And they started having me fixing stuff. Well, why does it do this? God. Look, you go into this thing and then you turn this. And so they said, wow, she's a godsend. So I came in and I helped them finish their first book. And I met Floyd. And everyone else that is still friends with me after 28 years. And the thing about Floyd, because I was starving, it was so cute, they put me in his office. He was supposed to be sick that day. And I didn't have a computer yet to work on. He says, well, just go in this office over here and work on his computer and we'll get you another computer, whatever. And I remember I went into his office and there was all this stuff and you couldn't tell who lived there because he had pictures of everybody, all colors. So you really couldn't say, were those his kids? Because there's some other kids over here. They could have been white kids, but there's you could not tell who was in this office. And he came in. He wasn't supposed to. He came in. And he saw me sitting there at his computer. And I said, would you want me to get up and leave? And he said, no, I'll just sit right here. And he sat down. And we ended up talking the whole day. He literally never stopped talking. And we've been talking ever since. The first book came out. And they kept me on. And as a freelancer, I freelanced for Disney for 10 years before I got hired. I didn't want to get hired, but I kind of got in a weird position where I kind of had to take the job that was offered to me, but I didn't want it. My friend tricked me and told me that if I didn't take the job, he's going to hire this other person that I couldn't stand. And I'm going to have to answer to them. And he knew that. And so, and even today we talk about that. Yeah, I know I lied to you, but I couldn't figure out another way to get you in there. So I said, okay, I'll take the job. And so I've been with Disney for 18 years as an employee. But I came on to Disney in 93, and I met Floyd, and the two of us just clicked. It changed my life. Everyone has that fork in the road that you can actually see where the road goes went that way. When I met Floyd, that completely and utterly changed my life. I can't even imagine what I would be doing now who I would be, what would have happened if I hadn't met him. And then we just planned, that we would just grow old and, see his kids, grandkids, and that would be it. And then all of a sudden, he becomes a Disney legend. And we're like, okay, where did that come from? And then he turns around, and then this kid comes from New York and says, hey, I want to make a movie about Floyd. And we're like, why? Well, because he's so cool. We got to make a movie about Floyd. And he says, well, go ahead, And I thought it was going to be like a student film. I had no idea that he had what the two of them had in mind for this movie. And that changed our lives to the next level. And none of that was ever expected from me. We thought we were just going to, just fade into the sunset, so to speak. But totally changed my life. It completely, utterly changed my life. Now you're talking to me because of that. That's the reason why you're talking to me. So it's been amazing. And the documentary, which is about Floyd, but I'm all through it. So people see me in there and they're like, well, who is that lady? And then I will say that's funny though, is that people, when they meet me, if they never saw the documentary and they meet me, I think they're always surprised. I think they look at Floyd, who's this older man, and he's probably married to like a little old lady who looks cute like this and whatever. And then they meet me, and then, younger. I'm 65, so I'm 21 years younger than Floyd. I'm 10, so I'm not short. And I'm me. And I'm
Right.
never, ever am I not Adrienne. I don't care who I'm talking to. My dad taught me that. You have to apologize for anything. You have to change your ways or anything. You can speak. You can speak any way you like. And so they're always kind of like, oh my God, that's his wife. And so I love that. I think that's fun. I have a lot of fun bobbing people like that. So it works out.
Yeah, something, because when I met you all in New Orleans, I always said I'm such a horrible millennial because it was at Essence Festival, like nobody knew who he was. They were coming to see the movie, but like nobody knew that.
They didn't know. Yeah.
I'm like, that's Floyd Norman. So I got to talk to him because nobody else was around to like be like, this is Floyd
Yeah, that
Norman.
was kind of sad. But they also weren't watching the Maya Angelou documentary, which came on just before our movie started. They showed the Maya Angelou, and there wasn't a crowd for that either. And I'm thinking, what's up with these Black people? And they were actually down the way at the other. I think there was like a Will Smith movie that was on.
Oh yeah, I think
there was a line for that. But nobody was watching the Maya Angelou, and I'm thinking that's why we don't know anything. That's why. Here's a chance for you to learn about this amazing woman with a life that is worth knowing more about.
Right.
But you choose instead, not that anything wrong with Will Smith. I love Will Smith, but you choose to go see that.
Yeah.
Instead of learning something, So when Floyd's came on, we knew it wasn't going to be a big crowd. So it wasn't something. But I enjoyed it.
I personally benefited, and I took a selfie with him, but because I'm a horrible millennial, it's blurry. So
I'm sorry about that, but we did have fun. I must say, I did enjoy being in. I've been to New Orleans since my first husband and I. We went there about a year or so after we got married, and a fascinating city. So it was fun. It was my 60th birthday, by the way. I had my 60th birthday that day. And the people who brought us there was the Bentonville Film Festival. That's the reason why our movie was at the Essence Festival, because of the Bentonville folks, started by Gina Davis. And
Arkansas?
Just great people. Yeah, in Arkansas. And we were there earlier. We had been to Bentonville the year before. So that's why we were there. And that was an amazing time. But I wish more people had come to see it. But, we were like, hey, whatever. Yeah. And people, and now they know him even more. I mean, as each year goes by, more and more people know who Floyd is, and so his whole world just kind of expands. And unfortunately, that includes me to a certain extent, which is just not my thing. But he loves it, so I don't mind. So
understandable. So I feel like you've told a lot of stories, but what is a story that you've never gotten to talk about? Like something maybe people wouldn't think to ask, or maybe an interesting thing about you or an interesting story?
I don't know. There's so many stories. I mean, since Floyd and I in the documentary, our lives have just been the people that we've met, the things we've done, places we've gone. Again, I do have a story. It's one of my. This is a story that's very heartfelt. And when I was young, I would obviously watch The Wonderful World of Disney, and as with everyone in America, and Uncle Walt and all that sort of thing. And I remember as a kid, I kept thinking, one day I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go work for Walt Disney. I'm going to be an artist for Walt Disney. And then he died. He died when I was 10 years old. And we were devastated because he was like family. I mean, it's hard to explain to people today. The world was much smaller then. Yeah. But when Walt died, it was like, what? Wait a minute. No, what are we going to do? Where's Walt? Anyway. So fast forward years later, and I will start the story this way. Floyd was asked to be in a documentary. I'm looking at the poster, a documentary called Walt, the Man Behind the Myth. Diane Disney had contacted Diane Disney.
Oh, I got that DVD.
Yes. And she had contacted Floyd and asked him if he would come on and talk about his Spike Lee little bit that he had made a comment in an interview that Spike Lee had called Walt Disney a racist, whatever, so-and-so. And Floyd had countered it in another interview by saying that, he wasn't a racist, and you didn't know him. I did. So how you gonna call somebody something and you don't even know him? You're going by whatever. He said, I did know him. And so Diane said, well, would you be willing to say that on camera in the documentary? So I said, sure. So anyway, so we go, and I meet Diane Disney Miller, who was the most amazing woman, and I'm honored I could call her a friend. And so we were sitting out there, and we literally just met her. So both Floyd and I were nervous, like, oh my God, this is Walt's daughter, and he'd never met her before because he just worked there. He never was like, whatever. And so she was there with her son and her daughter, one of her sons and one of her daughters, and she said to Floyd, she said, so tell me how the artists are being treated at Disney right now. This was in 1999. And this was not a good time for animation. It was the dark times and thinking about, shutting stuff down, Michael, what have you. But Floyd felt like he was still working there, and he felt like he was going to be the diplomat, which he is always. Floyd is such a nice person. He said, well, everything's fine. Everything's good. Everything's good. And he had to go get makeup on. He says, well, okay, get your makeup on. And she just looked at him like, okay, whatever. And so then he goes into the back, and we're sitting in these three directors' chairs. And it's Diane and her two kids, who were my age, or a little bit younger. And so Diane turns to me with the same Walt look, and very, very determined, and she looks at me and says, no, tell me the truth. How are the artists being treated? So I sat there and I said, well, what do I do? Now I just met Diane Disney. So do I stand with my husband and say, no, everything is fine? Or do I tell her the truth? So I had a split second to think about it. And I said, well, they treat the artists like shit. And she said, I know it, And she had this righteous anger. She says, oh, my father would never have done that. That's not what he wanted for his artists. And that's when the wall was dropped, the veil was dropped, and never again, she and I, the three, me and her and Floyd and the kids, just an amazing woman. So fast forward to Floyd working on the museum, the Walt Disney Family Museum, because she wanted him to be a part of that and help them design certain exhibits and stuff. So he got to go and work with her and become closer. And she would invite us up to their house, whatever and stuff. And so she finds out, well, the museum is open. I want you guys to come to the opening. And we're thinking, oh, of course, because Floyd worked on it. And I said, how should we dress? Oh, just it'll be like a cocktail, just something nice. It's all gathering, family, whatever. And so we go up there. The museum is beautiful, fantastic, 10 floor. I mean, however many 10 exhibits and just amazing exhibition. And she says, well, when you're done with that, go out from the back because it's on the Presidio and just follow. And we're going to have the party out there. So we're going to have whatever. And again, we're thinking family, whatever. So we finish, we go out, and there's this tent. It is a tent. And there's an orchestra playing. And there were people in tuxedos and walking in. Fortunately, I dressed Floyd and myself, and we were presentable. So we get in there, everybody's there. It's like dignitaries from San Francisco, people from the film community, people from Bob Iger's there. I mean, everybody's there, and we're like, oh my God, okay, this is good. And so we go to the table, like, this is your table number. So we go, and I'm saying, oh, number 12. I remember the number 12. So, well, that's probably in the back somewhere, which is fine with me because this is more than I thought this was going to be. So we're in the cocktail tent, and we're going for the big event. And again, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. As we pass the cocktail tent, we're in the main tent, which is like a ballroom tent. And there's flowers, and there's an orchestra playing. So we come in there, and then I see that our table is right next to, so Diane's table was here, and we're like kind of next to that table. Sitting at our table was her son. One of her sons was at our table. And other people that I'm not going to do name dropping. And I remember sitting there, and my food, and I'm looking around at everybody that's in this room, the people whose names I've heard of and whatever. And I said to myself, if someone had told me when I was a little girl that I would grow up and get to do what I've always wanted to do, but more than that, that I would be sitting in this kind of environment with Walt Disney's daughter. If someone had told me that a little black girl in Omaha, I would not have believed it. And I started to cry, you know, not gushing, but just a little bit. And then I wanted to go, after it was over, I wanted to go and tell her thank you, but she was surrounded by everybody. I mean, everybody was around her.
Yeah.
And I saw Ron, her husband, her late husband, Ron Miller, whom I loved Ron as well. And I said to Ron, I said, Ron, thank you so much for inviting me to Floyd. This was beyond, you know, whatever. He says, what are you talking about? Your family. And then I started crying again. I was like, oh my God. And I was just like, oh my God, okay. And that was one of those moments that I'll never forget. But that moment was something I never expected. And Diane was, she was her dad. She had a way of doing her eyebrow, just like Walt. And Floyd always tells me, you didn't meet Walt, but you met Diane. And that's like meeting Walt. And I always say to people who say, well, Walt was this racist, you know, whatever. I say, you know what? I've met his daughter. I've met his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I've seen the evidence of the people that knew him. And what you think he is not what he was. And he did things, he had his own way of doing things. And he, you know, some people kind of tricked him up and he had his own feelings. He's a Midwesterner, but this racist, you know, whatever, and didn't like women, that's none of that wasn't him. It just wasn't. And I can say that his daughter wouldn't be who she was if he was like that. His grandkids wouldn't be who they are if that's who he was. You know, I don't get evidence of any of that from anything that I've ever been around, or his family, or things that Floyd's told me. So I wish I could have met him. Oh my God, I wish I could have met him. But again, as a little girl, a little black girl in Omaha, Nebraska, you know, there's just who knew? I sure didn't know. And then the second part of that, because the other thing that Floyd is, and he's in the Motion Picture Academy, he's a member of the Academy. And I've been a movie fan since I was a kid. And I saw my first Oscars when I was 6 years old. My mother said I could watch it. I don't even remember what was on, because I don't even know these movies, but I was just fascinated by the whole thing. And I remember thinking to myself, one day I'm going to go to the Oscars. I don't know how. I mean, I'm not going to be an actress. I don't know anything about the movies. I'm 6 years old, you know. And then fast forward, and I get to go to my first Oscars in 2013 after Floyd had become a member. I'll never forget, because I made it a whole big deal with my family and friends, and we all went shopping for my dress. And the moment we were on the red carpet, I'll never forget, both Floyd and I, and we're looking at each other like, can you believe this? We're walking on that red carpet. But here's the problem. We got there too early, and there was a security guard telling us, hurry up, move through. And Floyd said, no. And he stood and said, I've waited my whole life to stand here. So Floyd stood there, and he folded his arms, and he was waving up to the people in the stands like, hi, and they waved back. They don't know who he is. but for us, it was like, no, dude, little security guard, no. I waited too long, and I'm not moving. And we stayed there. So that was one of those, that second kind of a moment where you think, where you don't know where your life is going to go, and then here you are, you know.
Yeah.
And those were two things that I love the movies, and I never thought I'd ever be in a community that has all that stuff in it. I wasn't trying to be, and I always wanted to work for Disney, and here I am, you know. And so it wasn't a big goal, but it was a goal. So those are my two favorite kind of stories that kind of show you with your past in your life, and who you meet and how things work out.
Yeah.
Know?
So a couple more questions. So you do photography. So how did you get into that, and what does that provide that's different from like drawing and illustration?
Well, photography is interesting because I started looking at photography books when I was a kid. I'll never forget, I was little, and I saw a book called The Family of Man. Very, very famous photography book that I forget. I found a copy of it, and I still have it. And I was like, what is this? And my dad said, well, that's photography. Someone takes a picture. He says, well, takes a picture how? how does that work? And so my dad says, well, go and get some books about it. So even as a kid, I started getting books on photography because I was like, what is this? And how do you choose what to shoot and how does that work? So I did a lot of history. I was reading about Steichen and Weston and Margaret Bourke White in the 19th century and the brothers and the daguerreotypes, the whole thing. But I couldn't afford a camera. Really. Cool. I didn't own my first camera until I went to Japan. And it wasn't even a camera. I bought box cameras. And that's how I took pictures of everything that I saw in Japan. And then so when the first digital camera came out, Floyd bought me one for Christmas. And it was so big. You only got like 5 pictures. The little card or whatever. It was so small you couldn't get whatever. And I was in love. And so what happened with the photography, I was at a restaurant called Element's Kitchen, which is one of our favorite restaurants. And they gave us some food, but they presented it so beautifully that I was like, this is, I can take a picture of it. And so I got my little power shot, whatever it was. And then I took a picture of these 3 blueberries on red rose petals. And that was the beginning. And I kept doing it. We'd go eat lunch there every day at 4 o'clock, whatever, dinner, whatever. And that's what started. And O'Neill Shibas, who's the one who owned Elements, and he's my good friend, and he owns a restaurant now, we made a book for him of his food. And then he hired me to do his food pictures. And then I got more into it. And then I started taking pictures of everything because I love faces. I'm a portrait artist. I'm trying to take pictures of people's faces. And I got into Flickr, and I got into the Flickr photography groups. Every time we would go into, we would meet with Flickr people. Back in then, that was a big thing. And everyone had their cameras. I always only had the power shots. I never had a serious camera until years later. And I finally I bought a Canon, and Floyd used it. And then I gave it to my nephews and stuff. But I just love, for me, it's like capturing life. And I never studied photography, so I don't know all the ins and outs of stuff. But I'm an artist. And I have a good eye, and I can just look at something, and I can see the art in it. I mean, I'm looking at it as if it's a painting.
Yeah.
And it just feels good. I mean, I just love it. I'm looking around my house right now, and I'm looking at things that if I was going to photograph, and how I would do it. And then I take it in Photoshop because I love Photoshop, and I just do a few little things here and there. Because usually I get what I want when I photograph it. And now I'm photographing my grandnephews who are models. And during the pandemic, they kept modeling, but with the stylist, they said, well, look, we can't have you come into a studio. We'll give you guys the clothes, you photograph it, and you send us the pictures, and we'll use what we want to use. And so they said, well, all right, Auntie she's got the camera. So we would go out, and I photographed my nephews. I always wanted to be a fashion photographer, so I got to do that with them.
Nice.
And they're very photogenic and very, very comfortable in front of the camera. And so I love doing it. But for me, it's just another extension of art. And right now, after my brother passed away, I got a box of old pictures that he had that my sister had given him. And I've been going through everyone's pictures. And I began restoring them and doing it in Photoshop. And not just, by rote, but I'm also looking at it as an artist.
Yeah.
So I'm leaving stuff in. So I don't want to take away the age and what it really is. But I'm enhancing it, fixing cracks, doing here and there. And it just feels good.
Nice.
But I never wanted to do it professionally, although I have done photo shoots. People have paid me to take pictures. I've done, and I love photographing men in particular.
Because you love men.
I love men. I really have no problem saying that. Floyd. But I find with women, most of the time women are like, oh my God, this is my bad side. I gotta put makeup on, my hair's not right. Oh my God, don't show this, But men are like, take the picture, man. They don't care if their hair is whatever. They don't care. And they let me photograph them. I can tell them, sit down over there, and it's no big deal. They don't. So for me, it's freedom for me to do what I want to do. To play with the lighting or play with the setting, because most men just don't care. And there's a friend of mine, this picture that's behind me, I don't know if you can can see it. I'm gonna move my phone a little bit, but that's okay. Anyway, that picture was what started me on my road of taking men's photographs.
Mm-hmm.
This is my frame. And I took this picture with a Canon. You see it?
Yep.
I took it with a Canon PowerShot 6. And he was in front of his mother's window in Omaha, Nebraska. And the light was right. And I hadn't seen him in like 20 years. He was my first love, so to speak. I hadn't seen him in a long time. And I said, take the picture. And it just felt right. He was my first muse. And Floyd was there. No, he wasn't there. This is when I went home without him. But he knew about him. But the picture just came out. And there was something about that led me on. I wanted to do a book. I wanted a book called The Average, about Black men, not about celebrities and all that. I wanted to do pictures of people's fathers, brothers, uncles, the guy who lives next door, that they're to be celebrated as well. And so I began taking pictures of all kinds of guys, all ages. And I still have them. Maybe one day I'll have to, put it all together, put it in a book time. But they should be celebrated,
Yeah.
And so that was what started that. But that picture, the picture that I just showed you, is what started it all. Of Josiah and his dreads, whatever. He didn't have those the last time I saw him. Yeah, he did. But they're like 25 years of his hair, of his locks growing and stuff. So anyway. But the photography, that's something that's for fun. I don't do it to make money. Because I want someone to tell me, I don't like that, fix it. You should fix that. I don't like what you did with my nose. I don't like what you did with that. Not anymore. I don't do that anymore. I can't. I have that on my job, and I don't want to deal with people telling me what to do outside of that. So that's why I probably will never do portraits again unless I just want to draw you.
Yeah.
Not because you're paying me, because it's not going to, I just don't care anymore.
So my last question is, and this is apropos, if someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight outside of your life in like illustration and art?
Well, my life has not been as happy as Floyd's. So I would find that, matter of fact, one of the complaints that this one critic had about Floyd's documentary was that there was not enough pain, that Floyd hadn't experienced enough drama in his life. And they were like, well, where's the angst? I said, well, he did go through a divorce. Well, it's not enough. We need to see more pain. No, anyway. So my life has a lot more angst. But I know that all of that is a build up to who I am. So, and all of that feeds into what it is that I do and who I've become. So from my life story, I think it would be a good one if they do have to show my family. They do have to show that part of my life, the pain, because that's all a part of me. Some of it I won't talk about. There's some things that I don't think anyone needs to know about that. But there are moments that define you. I know my mother, I always tell people about my mom. This is interesting. My mother was like Job. I used to say, Mom, you're like Job. Everything bad has happened to you. I don't know, what is it with you? And my grandparents was a minister, and she had a pretty good life. Matter of fact, she had an allowance during the Depression. She would take her kids she'd take her friends to the movies. They can see the movies. So she had a pretty good life. And then my grandparents sent her to school. She went to University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and then she went to the Boston Conservatory of Music because she wanted to be a singer, an opera singer. She wanted to be like Marian Anderson. That was her goal. And what happened was she met my father. My dad's band, jazz band, came to Omaha, and their girl singer quit and needed a girl singer. And someone told my mom, you should go audition for this band. And she did, without my grandparents knowing. And she went, and my father heard her sing, and he hired her. And that, as they say, was that. And she had heard Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald, and she knew she wanted to sing jazz. My grandfather was such a gentleman, but he was very, very, very upset. And but then my father was a ladies' man. his whole thing was, I got to get every woman that I meet. I don't know if that was what his whole thing was, but I think that was somewhere in the back of his mind, that I must be with every woman that I meet. So my mother played hard to get, because she was hard to get. She wasn't even dating. That wasn't something on her mind. Her whole thing was about whatever. And my dad got her, and then he got her pregnant. So they got married. And had all of us, had 5 kids. But because of that, my mother, her health, she was pregnant for 5 years straight. And she got, let me see, let me get it all right. She got hit by a bus. She got hit by lightning twice.
Wow.
She had a brain hemorrhage. Then she lost her hearing. Then she got lupus. And I'm missing something else. But it was like a series of things that happened to my mother. And by the time 1961 came, I was about 6 years old, and my dad pulled us all together and told us that mom was going to die within a year. The doctors had given her like a year to live with everything that was going on with her. And what happened was, of course, that the doctor died within the year, and my mother lived another 25 years. But my mother loved talking about that. She said, "Oh, he's dead, but I'm still here." But that affected me because I kept waiting for her to die. So she would be sleeping, and I would go and check to make sure she was breathing, to make sure that she was, she was awake. So that affected my childhood in a way. I'm a hypochondriac because of it. But I remember one event in particular when my father was overwhelmed. And this was after they had told him the news that she was going to die within the year. And he had lost his job. He was trying to work as a musician, but he worked in the daytime, worked at the bakery, and life was just not working. And I'll never forget, he put all 5 of us kids in the car, and he drove us to Carter Lake, which is it's a lake in Omaha, Nebraska. And it was the middle of the night. I remember because we got out, we had our pajamas on, and he got us all out of the car, and we were all standing at the edge of the lake. And I could still feel the ground beneath my feet. It was very cool and slick and stuff. And Daddy was kind of crying. And then he changed his mind, obviously. I think he was going to kill us all and himself. And then he said, "Get back in the car. Get back in the car." And we got back in the car, and we came home. Never talked about it again. He might have said something to us, but I don't remember what he said. All I remember was the desperation and the pain. And I remember being scared and wondering what's going on. We got back in the car, and we came back home. And I never forgot that. So my life was, there was a lot of pain.
Yeah.
At the same time, there was a lot of joy. It was almost like the Wayans brothers said that, humor kept them so they wouldn't think about not eating. That was my family. And my father was funny, and we were funny, and we would make jokes. And then there was the music, and then there was art. And so with all the sadness, there were also the good things. And loving my grandfather and then whatever. And so it was a balance.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about her, is that her spirit, she was a real devout Christian, and I became a Christian at the time because of my mother. And because I said, well, anybody who can believe and still, after I went through that and still believe, there must be something there. And so I believe because of her. Now I'm kind of, we won't talk about how I feel about religion, but mother, it was her rock. And she was she was such a good person. She cared about everybody. I miss her terribly. She died in '84, and it took me a year, maybe 2 years, to finally really deal with that, because I was in California when she died. I didn't get a chance to see her.
Yeah.
And so that devastated me, but she was amazing. And then my dad, interesting person. I love my father, but I have issues with him. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I wouldn't be who I am without the two of them. And I wouldn't be where I am without them raising me how they did. I thank them for how they raised me. I would tell you one small story that explains the weirdness of my family. Is that my father, because of the music, he had to listen to everything. There was nothing we didn't listen to. He wanted us to listen to everything, from polka music to whatever. And he bought us this classical music kit where they had batons, and it showed the the orchestral arrangement of the brass and the horns. And we had to watch Leonard Bernstein's young people's concert every year. Whenever it came on TV, we had to sit and watch it. So we were indoctrinated into classical music, and I loved it. And but then the Beatles came out, and we were the right age for the Beatles. We were kids, but man, we fell in love with the Beatles. Oh my God! And we were still living in South Omaha. We had moved to North Omaha, which is the Black community. We were living with everybody else. And we had made guitars out of cardboard and old sticks, and we had made the mop heads on our heads so we could have the Beatle hair and stuff. We're talking with English accents. We're little Black kids talking with Liverpool accents in Omaha, Nebraska. And so we moved to North Omaha. It's all Black people. And we're thinking that they're into the same thing we are because we're totally into the Beatles. And we're coming outside talking like Ringo, like Liverpool accent. And they're looking at us like, and then getting our butts kicked like you cannot believe. Chasing us home from school. What is wrong with you? They wanted to beat us up. And it was traumatic because we just figured that everybody did this. You found out that Black people don't do those things. Now, interestingly enough, in my family, my sister in particular was so annoyed by that she didn't really like Black people in the sense that not she liked them, but she felt like I can't play those games. I'm who I am. But with me, I liked Black boys so much that I needed to learn how to assimilate so I could be around Black boys. I love Black boys so much. And so I was probably more in tune with the Black community and what they were doing and the customs than my other part of my family were. I liked the things that make us who we are. I celebrate those things. And my family, they do too, but not quite the same way. They could do it and then move away. My brother Derek is a musician in Omaha, and he is such a fascinating person. I would recommend if you get a chance that I can give you a link to his YouTube channel. He has the biggest vinyl collections in the world, and he talks about music. And Derek plays everything. He plays everything from jazz to heavy metal to emo to reggae. It doesn't matter. Derek loves music, and that is my family. Derek is the encapsulation of my family. Yeah. But with me, the things of Black people, Black music, and all that, I probably embrace that more than anyone else in my family. House parties and listening to James Brown. We all love that, but for me, to me, it was like, this is just the best. Black men, Black women, dancing, the soul, the food. Because my family didn't do that. There was no family picnics, cookouts. My dad did not cook out. We didn't have the Black barbecue. We never did. I mean, I would go to some, but that was not the culture in my house. House was another world. Yeah. So sometimes I feel apart, from how they talk about what their lives were. And I say, well, that wasn't quite how my household was. My mom would have liked it that way because she was more traditional. But my dad, he was in another world altogether. So if I had to make a movie, I would like to see that. Because one of the things I don't like is when everyone assumes that all Black people like the same thing. Yeah. All Black people do the same thing, or that all Black people, that's not true. And when I came to California, this is very important. When I came to California as an artist, and I wanted to be an artist, I wanted to be a fine artist. I didn't know that you could be other things. I had no idea you could be an illustrator or you could be whatever. So I volunteered at the Black Museum that's over there by USC. I forget what it's called now. And I volunteered, trying to get next to people. And I brought my portfolio. And I'm not going to name names because I'm just not going to do that. But I brought my portfolio to show some people who were on the board. They're all Black people. And some of them are quite well known. Or they relatives are well known. And the one lady said to me, she said, well, your art is not Black enough. It's not Black. Why is your art is too happy? She said it was too happy. Because when I do pastels, I just draw what I want. I'm not thinking about Black history. I'm just drawing whatever I want. And if I see a white face that I find fascinating, then I'm going to draw that. I don't care. And she said, well, it's not black enough. And it's too happy. And I was like, damn, I said, well, okay. And so once I showed it to someone else, I showed it to another person behind there. And they, once again, everyone said my artwork was not black enough. And that bothered me because I'm a black woman. I'm an artist. And this is the art that comes out of me.
Yeah.
And what more do you want from me?
Right.
Do I have to draw pain? Do I have to draw pain? I got to draw black people in chains. I got to draw people crying. And that's what you want me to do, but that's not how I feel. I've been there, yes, but that's not what I'm trying to convey. And that was a really bad experience for me, and it really hurt me. And it made me very angry about it. And so I discovered, a couple of years later, the art of Thomas Blackshear. And I didn't know he was black. And then I saw his work in a workbook. And he was an illustrator. And then someone said, oh, that's Thomas Blackshear. And I was like, oh my God, how does he do that? Can I do that? How do you get to do that? And so that was the beginning of me understanding that I could be something other than a fine artist, and I could do work for it. Because what Thomas Blackshear did is what I wanted to do. And my friend Drew Struzan doing movie posters, that's what I want to do. But when they told me back then that I wouldn't make it because my art wasn't black enough, and that my art was too happy, and that there was no seriousness, and I needed to change what I was doing, and that really upset me. And so I have some young artists that I know that they feel that they must do Afrocentric, they must do black-centric work, and I'm not going to tell them not to. You got to paint what you want to paint, by all means. But the world is too big. There's too many people, too many things for me to limit what I do. I should be able to, as an artist, paint, draw, sculpt, whatever in the hell I want to do. If you like it, you can buy it. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. I'll just keep it and I'll have it for myself.
Right.
But don't ever tell me what I should or shouldn't do. So that was a real thing, a real moment for me.
Yeah.
And very disappointed in one artist that I met. As a young artist, I wanted to talk to her. And she came into the shop and I said, oh my God, Miss, I love your work and I would love to talk to you about, how you got started. She looked at me like, I don't have time for you. I don't even think she said hi to me now that I'm thinking about it. And she just kind of dismissed me. And she walked away. But I remember thinking to myself, if I ever make it big, I will never do what she just did to me. There was no reason for that. And because there's so few black people that do, especially black, that do what she was doing, to walk away from me and to make me feel as if you're bothering me, you're in my eyesight, can you please move? You don't do that to people. But maybe that day was a bad day for her. I always give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe if I asked her the next day, she would have been more open. But she sure wasn't open that day. That's all I know. She was not being very friendly. So it's like when you asked me to do this, my first inclination was to say no, because I don't like it. But then I thought, she's asking me for a reason. And maybe if something I'm saying today, maybe someone will hear that and make them feel like maybe, I can do this or try a little bit harder, then that's worth it. And then my other advice, and you're probably going to ask me this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. But my other advice that I always say to young artists when they bring me their work or they show me or tell me about their work, and I always ask them, are you any good? And then they always say, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand that question. So no, are you any good? If you don't think you're any good, why should I think you're any good? I mean, it's about a confidence. You might not be any good. Let's be honest. You might not be. But at least you got to believe in yourself enough to say, you know what? I'm pretty good. And I want you to see what I do. That makes me want to see what you do even more. Now, it might suck when I see it. I don't know. But you believe in yourself enough that you're saying to me, yes, I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
You take a look at what I got. And then I'll look at it. And then the second thing I say after that is I say that you also have to be willing to understand what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
Everybody's not the same. everybody can't draw the same. So if you do the best you can do, and then you look at other stuff and yours is not like that, and you want to do what that is, you have to be able to say to yourself, maybe that's not what I'm going to do.
Right.
Maybe I should do this instead. You have to be self-aware enough to understand what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I talk about my friend Drew Struzan. He's the artist that paints the movie posters that everybody sees, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. And you look at Drew's work and you see it in real life, you're just like blown away, you know. And a lot of people can't do that. And he does it because he does it. But you have to be able to say, I want to be a movie poster, but my posters look like this. And look at him. You have to be willing to say, well, okay, yeah, I can't really do that. Okay, I'm going to try something over here because this is more. So I'm not good at painting animals. I hate painting animals. I hate it. I really do. I had to do it, you know, because I work for Disney.
Right.
It's not my favorite thing to do. And I'm not good at it. I will be honest. I am not good at animals. I just suck, man. So you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
If you don't feel good about yourself, I don't know who else will. And the one thing I always knew, because coming up during that period and with Black people, and it was not the best time for. I remember that line in Men in Black 3 says, "It wasn't a good time for your people." I'm just saying, well, this was not a good time for Black people when I was coming up, but and there was racism all the time. I mean, I got called a nigga when I was 5 years old, and you know, came home and asked my mom, "What's up with that? You know, why was I? What is that?" And it was just one of those things. I mean, it was just life. But if I didn't know anything else about me, I knew I was a good artist. And I remember when I got married, and the person that I married was not a nice person, and he left me by telling me that I was, you know, fat and ugly, and I would never find anyone as good as him. It's like, thank you so much, you know. And then he ran off with my best friend, and they got married, and clearly they were meant to be because they remained married and they had kids. So clearly that was the person you're supposed to be with. It probably would be better if we had never got married, but we did. What can I say, you know? But with all of what he said to me, which I believed, unfortunately, at the time, because I had low self-esteem, but I knew, so I'm a good artist. You can't take that away from me. That was always my talisman that I kept close to me. No matter how I felt about other things in my life, I knew I'm a good artist. And that was just I just knew it. And I still know it. I'm a good artist. I don't know. What do you want from me? It's what I do, you know? And I took it this way, and then I put it in the computer, and I'll probably do it another way. Who knows? I don't know. But it's who I am. I am an artist. I mean, I almost want to say, if I had to pick which thing that I am, how I look at myself, I would say I'm a woman first. I'm an artist, and I'm Black. And you can take that any way that you want to. The art is it's my soul. You know, and people ask me, would you teach? No, I'm not teaching shit. I mean, I don't mind. No, really, I don't mind talking to somebody one-on-one. You want to talk to me and ask me questions or how, you know, whatever, that's cool. But teaching in front of a bunch of people, like you said, when you were doing it in Japan or Korea, nah. I've done it, and that's not my personality. And I'm fine one-on-one, possibly two. I've done classes because I have some people I had to teach how to paint a certain way who live in Spain, and we had to do like a Zoom thing where I had to explain with the interpreter how to paint a certain way. So I don't mind doing that, but being a teacher, no. But ask me anything, then I'll tell you how I did it. But so.
One more thing I'll mention, because when you were talking about your mom earlier, I thought of this like Instagram post that I saw the other day, and it's like the power of Black women. So it says, this person on Twitter said, my mom, who is a Black woman, had a patient tell her at 11 a.m. that a man was in the room telling them to come with him. And it's just the mom and the patient in the room. So my mom's response was, you better tell him to come back at 7:30 when my shift is over. And why did the patient die at 7:35? like the Grim Reaper was coming to the man at 11 a.m. And she's like, you better wait till my shift is over at 7:30. And he died at 7:35.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Wow. So I thought of when the doctor died and your mom did.
Well, that was her favorite story, you know. He died and I'm still here. You know, it was like, yeah, I mean, she lived another 20-something years and he died. But her perseverance was amazing. And she was, you know, it was funny. She lost her hearing. So I never heard my mother sing. And my dad, we always said that she had the most amazing, incredible voice. But of course, we never got to hear her because, you know, whatever. But when we would play our music, we would be playing on a record player, whatever, and we would have the bass would be playing, and my mom could hear the bass. Yeah. So she would be like, you know, what is that you're listening to? And so she would hear, we turn the bass up, and she would be like, okay, I got that, okay, you know, she could hear the beat, you know. But I always wish that I could have heard her sing. If I always watched the show Fantasy Island, and so if I could go back in time, if I could go and hear my mother sing with my dad's band, that would be something that I would give anything to see that. So, but for me, my mother, I don't have a mentor. I don't have someone to look up to as an icon. I never have. But if I had to pick someone that I would look to as someone that I admired and that I looked up to, it would be my mother and father, my grandfather, who was the epitome of men. He died when I was 10, same year as Walt Disney. And my grandfather was just like, he was just the absolute best of men. And Floyd reminds me of him, which is probably not the sexiest thing to say to someone. You remind me of my grandfather. And Floyd's like, thank you for that. Yeah. But I mean that in the sense that Floyd's personality, his generosity, his grace, his kindness, that was my grandfather. My grandfather was just absolutely wonderful. So I think that's why I have such a balanced view of men. I look on Instagram and I look at so many women, all women, but even with Black women, that are so angry with men, and they have reason to be, certainly. But at the same time, you know, we're all human beings first, and then we're whatever else we are. And for everyone, whatever they've done, there's a reason why people do what they do. Yeah. And you have to be willing to get to the bottom of that if you really want to get to the bottom of why people feel how they do. I've counseled people, not because I'm a counselor, but I'm really good at listening. If someone asks me something, I don't look at them and say, well, you're a bad person. I can look at you and no, I'm like, okay, tell me what's going on. I listen to it without judgment. What'd you do? You killed somebody? Well, that sucks. But why'd you kill him? What was the reason? There must have been a reason that you wanted to kill him. So that's what I'm saying. I'm willing to listen and understand the pain or understand the joy or understand whatever.
So I would like to thank you for coming on my platform and allowing me to highlight you. Thanks.
Okay. I thought that was interesting.
And to everyone out there, I want you to like so I know it's real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.